Well, you're welcome back to Off the Ball Saturday here on News Talk. John Duggan with you through until 8 o'clock this evening because we got live commentary of Exeter against Munster in the Champions Cup later on. It also means we'll have the results live on air of the Grand National, the most famous race in the world. First run in 1839 in Liverpool, won by a horse called Lottery. And this year's renewal goes to post at Aintree at 5:15. Minella Times bids to win the race for the second year in a row. Rachel Blackmore riding again for Henry de Bromhead. And someone who has won the Great Steeplechase on 2 occasions is Irish jockey and the former champion jumps rider in the UK, Richard Dunwoody. Richard, good afternoon.
John, good afternoon. Good to talk to you.
And you, Richard, delighted to be speaking to a legend of the turf here. And I believe you're living in Spain now.
Yes, we've been here about nearly 4 years now. So, great place. We were in Madrid, in the middle of Madrid, in quite a small flat, and we love that too. But we've moved out the country last year, out to a town called Manzanares El Real. We're beside a national park, La Pedriza, and it's fantastic. It's great. Millie now is 6, our daughter, and she goes to a local school, and let's say her Spanish is a lot better than mine.
Very good. Well, I'm sure you get by, Richard. What do you do now? I think you're involved in websites and photography. Is that right?
Yeah, we've been building through over sort of COVID and lockdown and everything else. Olivia and I, we started building a few websites. That sort of developed over the last couple of years, and now basically I've just had my first trip away again. Was covering the Gaucho Derby, photographing the event down the Andes, 500 kilometers through the mountains, which was good fun. The riders did extremely well. They got, most of them got through it. But yeah, that's the sort of things keep me busy. I've got a few trips coming up through the summer, leading horse riding holidays, and looking forward to those.
The Gaucho Derby, where is that held? Is it in Argentina?
It's in Argentina, yeah. Argentina, run by a company called the Equestrianists, riders from all over the world, 35 lined up. And let's say rather them than me. Anyway, I was in the Jeep following, and it was tough enough actually following them. So they did a great job and got through. Is
the terrain kind of wild out there, is it?
It was, yeah. Let's say the foothill, but there were, some of them going up to probably about 2,000 meters, so getting pretty high, snow, so yeah, it was quite tough conditions for them. So, but as I say, everyone returned safe and sound, and that was the main thing.
We'll get to some of the daredevil and the travel you've done over the years since you retired, Richard, at the end of the 90s, around 2000. Because I suppose many people growing up, I remember you as one of the top jockeys in the UK on the TV, the Grand National, the Cheltenham Gold Cup, all that kind of thing. When you were young, was the Grand National something you watched when you were a kid on TV?
Definitely, yeah. Dad trained near Belfast, growing up near a small town called Malile, and basically from the age of 4 or 5, I had to watch the Grand National every year, and I remember actually. It coincided with our local point in North Down Harriers. Mum and Dad, they always went to the point, but this year it coincided with the Grand National. So I put my foot down. I think it was age 6 or something. There was no way I was going to the point. Had to stay at home and watch the Grand National. So luckily they find a babysitter or whatever, and I was able to watch it. And I think from that age, I was always, I always wanted to hopefully one day ride in the race. Made my mind up at sort of 14, 15 that if I was never good enough to make it professional jockey, I'd, hopefully be an amateur and raise enough money one day to buy my own horse and ride in the race that way. Unfortunately, as things worked out, so I was able to get paid for it, and rode in the race, I think 14 or 15 times, and some amazing rides in the race. Very lucky to have enjoyed the pressure of it all, but the huge thrill of just riding over those fences. Absolutely amazing.
1985, West Tip won at Cheltenham and was the joint favourite for the National. It was your first ride in the race. I think you'd ridden over the fences in shorter races. Were you nervous? How did you feel for your first ride in the National?
I think I was probably more confident for that first for that first ride, but because I didn't know what was in front of me. I was I went out there with more confidence in that race than I probably did in later races during the 90s. As it was, we ended up on the floor. Probably I was upsides in front, probably too soon going to Beeches. I always had it in my mind to get a good lead over Beeches second time, having seen, quite a few horses over the years in front. Horses like Andy Pandy during the 70s fell there. And basically the same happened to West Tip. He sort of took his eye off the fence. It was about the only mistake. I rode him 4 or 5 times there. 4 times I was placed. And, he was an amazing ride. And that was probably the only mistake he ever made with me around there. But basically it was, I'd say, the crowd around the fence. In those days, they weren't set back. There was a huge crowd down at Beeches, and I think he was just distracted.
Back then, the race was possibly more intimidating than it is now. They've modified the fences, they've shortened the distance. You had beachers, you had the drop, you had the chair. Was it a race that it took a bit of knowing to get to ride? Was it something that you were thinking about tactically more so than other races? Was it a case that there'd be less talk? Was it the race that would fill you with more adrenaline than any other race?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely more adrenaline than any other race. Yeah, it was just, it's the one thing. We have Cheltenham, it was only 3 days of Cheltenham, and then it was just everything was focused to getting yourself a good, decent ride. And I was very lucky with West Tip. As I say, he was my first five Grand National rides. So I didn't have to sort of worry too much about that. But as you say, the more experience, I got great experience on West Tip riding around there. And I think that experience then helped when I rode other horses around there. Always ended up pulling a little bit wider. And we're talking about a totally different course to what it is now. It's evolved. What we were riding over a different course from what there was in the 50s, even into the 60s. The fences were very upright. The drops are even probably a bit bigger. Then they started modifying it through the 90s. And in ways now the fences aren't the same as they were in the 80s and 90s. Some people will say, quite rightly so. I think that nowadays you've got to have we've got to have had those modifications to make the course safer. But in some ways it's sad. It's not quite the challenge it was during the 80s and 90s. Yeah.
Still, though, you need certain attributes to win a Grand National. What type of horse do you think you need, Richard, having ridden the winner twice? Is it jumping? Is it stamina? Is it age? Yeah, what are the things? Weight? What are the things?
Obviously, you got the trip is very, very important. Yeah, you've got to have a horse that stays well, especially if the ground's a bit soft. I think it went good to soft or something yesterday. Whether it'll dry up at all for the weekend, I don't know. Got to have a horse that stays well. That's it. When my two winners, they both got the trip very, very well, and I was very lucky. I had both of my horses, very intelligent horses, and they certainly knew how to look after themselves around the course. West Tip could see danger before I could, and Mini Houma was exactly the same. I always remember the sort of first fence, second time round on Mini Houma, loose horse ran right down the fence, just in front of us. I didn't even see him, came from nowhere. He wiped Jamie Osborne out, Garrison Savannah, jumped into them. So, and basically Mini Houma had seen it all happening before I did, just sidestepped around them. He looked after me, primarily looked after himself, but he looked after me as well. So you need a clever horse, you need an intelligent horse as well.
When we look back at 1986, West Tip won the race for you the first time. When do you feel I have this? Is it not until you get to the elbow, or is it before that?
Certainly that year, I was traveling well from a long way out. I fell, made that mistake, got him upsize in front in 85. I said at the time, we'll come back and win it next year. That very rarely happens. Something goes wrong with the horse, or you're injured or whatever else. But we were lucky to then line up again in 86. And basically from Canal Turn, it was, I was going well. I think, looking around me, whatever, the horses weren't traveling as well as I was. My main thing then was to get a good lead The horse idled in front. He didn't do a lot. So basically, young driver, Chris Grant, they gave me the lead over that I needed over those last two fences. And yeah, the got to the elbow and then kicked for home.
What do we not see on TV that you encounter in a race like a Grand National over 4+ miles, all those fences, 30 fences, and all the famous fences? Are there things that go on that we don't see?
Yeah, there's, I suppose some people can't believe it, that you actually have time for a chat here and there, and certainly you'd have the odd line. Sort of, I always remember pulling up sides Jamie Osborne and asking him how he was going on Garrison Savannah that year in 1994. Jamie was saying, yeah, he was like having such a great ride off him, but it just shows 1 minute you're traveling well, next minute you're knocked straight out of the race, because we went down to the next fence and he was wiped out. So you do. Obviously, there's a bit of shouting. I remember one year, I think the year I won on West Tip, I pulled out, probably unaware that Tom Taff was behind me. I think he was riding a horse called Sommelier, and he gave me a fair bollocking going down to Beaches that year, because I'd sort of taken his ground just as we were approaching the biggest fence on the course. So he wasn't too happy.
I read in the book Obsessed that you had a word with Adrian Maguire as well, because you were both going for the jockey title in 1994. He was on Moorcroft Boy, you were on Mini Houma.
Yeah, that's right. Again, I shouted across to Adrian, haven't you won enough this year? Haven't you won enough races? Because he was traveling really, really well. We come back across the Mellon Road, looked across, suddenly I thought I had 3 or 4 horses around me, I had them all covered. And then suddenly Moorcroft Boy sort of looms into view, and Adrian, I just thought, oh no, that's me beat. And certainly then I thought that my main thing was not to be again on Mini Houma the same, not to be in front too long, and was trying to get that lead off Adrian. He jumped the last, he went about two lengths clear, and I thought that was it, all over. It was gone. And then suddenly the switch around, basically Adrian stopped and I ended up winning. But so we get a bit of time for the odds, the odd line here and there. Yeah.
So when you're going to win on West Tip or Mini Houma, is the high indescribable? Is it just something we can't relate to?
Yeah, I think it's the sort of horse racing equivalent of winning, whether it's a World Cup or an FA Cup or the pinnacle. It was absolutely amazing coming in. I think it was 2022, the first year on West Tip, and it sort of all went past in a blur, really, that year. I think they did things a little bit differently. They presented the trophy, then they drove us up and down in a car, I think, afterwards, and then you're shipped off the next couple of days to do morning television as well. So the second time, I always remember traveling up with Carlo Ellen, I think it was sort of early 90s, and we both said if we ever win it again, we ever lucky enough to win it again, we'll make sure we take it in, enjoy it, and got more of a chance to sort of appreciate it the second time on Mini Houma.
That was in 1994, and there were some strange years, Richard. The year before, the Void race, that was mad.
Oh, it's crazy, absolutely. I always remember I was on a horse called the well-named Won't Be Gone Long, for Nicky Henderson, and I jumped up, but there was a girl riding the race, Judy Davis, but her horse just got his head over the tape just as we jumped off, and it was basically the tape was hanging. I think that the start of that year was very unfairly criticised because it had been raining. The tape that had been recommended to sort of tighten it up to make sure it was a better starting tape, but with the rain it sagged a bit. That caused the horses to get their head over it. Anyway, the tape was broken. It ended up around my neck as we were galloping down to the first fence. Horses were stepping on it, and I had no option. I pulled up, and the first person really to confirm to me that it was a void race, a false start, was Jamie Osborne again. and Jamie had quite clearly, he'd been on the wide outside, and there was a microphone, a loudspeaker out there, and he'd heard the start, a call full start quite clearly. And so the 6 or 7 horses that had pulled up at the first fence, we then returned to the start. I got off my horse, he was led back to the stables, and I walked down to the chair, and it was down there, myself, Jamie, a couple of others. We tried to stop the horses, basically. We sort of tried to wave them down along with a couple of the officials of the racecourse, but none of the jockeys would stop. Very few of the jockeys would stop. I think Peter Scudamore stopped after a circuit, but the rest of them kept going, and it was always said that as the riders went down the beaches, one turned the other. So I think we're supposed to stop. And he said, "No bloody way, I'm stopping in this. I'm going far too well on this horse." So that was it. And I think probably 7 or 8 kept going, and just a crazy part of the whole history of the Grand National. What it was all about. What it is all about. Yep.
Yeah, John White, the jockey, you could see the pain in his face when he crossed the line in SNS. It got very heated. I remember on the TV watching as a young lad, like Des Lynam and everything. Everybody, it was just complete chaos. Was it chaos in the weigh room?
It was chaos all over the course. Yeah. In some ways we actually went home and had a laugh about it. I felt very sorry for John White as well, but he knew as much as anyone else. I think Adrian was concerned there. Richard Guest was still going at the end, but all the way from the last, where the crowd were actually booing, the horses as they were coming up the run. Everyone knew by that stage, and John, I'm sure himself would have known that things aren't right, and almost immediately it was called void. So there was just no doubt about it. But we all went home that evening and just had a big laugh about it. I think that was the way it was that year.
Yeah. And then the bomb scare in 1997. Did you just have to leave the course in your silks?
Yeah, that was right. We were literally just before. I was just getting, I think, my cap tied onto my helmet, and they said, right, out, everyone out. And I suppose we didn't know at that stage. We didn't know how long it would take. We might be called back in, that afternoon. They might clear the course. They might find whatever it was and sort it out. But so we started out. I think it was a cold day as well, and we went out and we sat in a wall. Or a lot of the jockeys, we went out and sat in a wall just outside the course in our silks. And eventually, as time wore on, we knew, that's it. There's no way they're going to race today. And then we went to Kind Lady, just up the road, basically. Our valets, John Buckingham, Tom Buckingham, they always stayed with her every year. And she invited her into a little terraced house, and there were about 20 jockeys in there, about 5 valets. And we all went in. She brought us all a cup of tea, warmed us up, and that was one of the memories of that race. And then, of course, 2 days later, we returned for the one race. Sort of around 5 o'clock on the Monday afternoon, it was run, and Lord Guyleen, Tony Dublin won the race. Yeah,
I remember that well. 1997 on the Monday. When you retired, Richard, and I know you had to retire a bit sooner maybe than you'd hoped because of a neck injury, you did lots of different things then. You've been to North Korea, you've been to Afghanistan, and you went to the South Pole. Was this, in a way, kind of trying to replace the thrill and the buzz and the adventure of being a rider?
It's something I sort of picked up when I retired from riding. I was running a sports marketing business. That didn't go very well. So then I had the freedom really to travel, and I went traveling in 2001 and came back from that. Met a guy called David Hampton Adams about 2002, did a sort of semi-adventure northern Canada in Baffin Island. Came back from that and I wanted to do a little bit more. I got involved in something called the Polar Race to the Magnetic North Pole. And sort of one thing led to another, and I was just very lucky through connections, people I met through, obviously some through racing. Johnny Bealby, who runs Wild Frontiers, I still lead trips for him. His his parents and his brothers worked in racing, and so it just evolved. But I have to say, getting the expedition together for the South Pole is something look back at. I was proud to have got there. It was tough. It was probably the hardest thing I've ever done, and I'm not saying 48 are the best days of my life, but looking back, it was great to have got there.
2008, I believe that was. How long did you have to prepare for that?
From about 2003, 2004, when we did the magnetic North Pole, sort of made it a goal and spent a sort of good year. I'd say we left December 2007, 48 days. And, so I was preparing, went to Norway. I was training with a lady up there called Matty McNair, Canadian. Getting things together. Then Matty stepped down from leading the trip. I had to find someone else to lead it. And sort of at the last minute, I brought on a guy called Doug Staupen, a Californian. And we managed, we got there in the end. So it's a sort of major undertaking, but we managed to get there.
Were you fitter in training for that than you ever were as a jockey? Was there different types of fitness that you were engaged in?
Yeah, in some ways, probably. Yeah. I enjoyed running. So I've run half marathons, a couple of few marathons, mostly a long time ago, but 3 or 4 marathons as well. So enjoyed keeping fit and a bit of running. But that one was more about core strength, and we ended up pulling tires. I was living in London at the time, and so ended up pulling tires around Richmond Park. Getting lots of very funny looks. Well, what are we doing? But did a lot of that to help with the training for pulling the sledges. The sledges, when we set off, weighed about 120 kilo, and you rode through about 700 miles. It was the full route. You also rise onto the plateau in Antarctica, and that's probably a climb of about 1,500, almost 2,000 meters. So it was tough. Yeah, doing about 15 mile a day.
I was reading that you were eating a huge amount as well. Yeah,
and calories wise, probably 7,000 calories a day, and it wasn't enough. Came back, it certainly wasn't enough. I always just remember being so hungry out there that literally if you spilt a noodle, you'd be, looking them out amongst the ice to sort of pick out. I was just remember being so hungry out there. We didn't really take enough provisions. If we did it again, we would have certainly taken more. I lost about around 40 pounds out there in 48 days, almost a pound a day.
Unbelievable, Richard. An incredible achievement. I'd rather you than me, though, when I hear about that. Were you not scared out of your wits at times?
I have to say there was 1 or 2 days where, it was very scary. We said to, Doug was leading. He had a lot of experience of both the North Pole and the South Pole as well. He'd led expeditions down there before. But we said if we find a crevasse field, we'll avoid it. We'll go around it. I said, we've got plenty of time. We've got provisions there. We thought for 60 days when we set out. I said, we've got the time to sort of avoid it. But we ended up in the middle of a crevasse field and literally being sucked into it. With 1 or 2 small crevasses, and we crossed those, and then 1 or 2 more. And we ended up, we'd come so far, we couldn't turn back. And we were in the middle of a pretty bad crevasse field. It's the only one I've been in, but Doug had enough experience of both the mountain sand and polar regions, and he said it was bad. It was pretty tough for a couple of days, but fortunately we got out of it about 24 hours in the middle of this crevasse field. We ended up getting clear of it, but we had a few scares. He nearly fell in the crevasse, and we were lucky.
Testing your patience and your mental strength just as much as you did in the Grand National, Richard. Look, there's an incredible story, and I just wish you so well in what you're doing now, and the photography and the websites and everything. Is racing something that's maybe kind of like a closed chapter in your life that you open the book at time to time? Is that the way you might describe it?
Yeah, it's nice to sort of, talk to old friends, see come back and to the UK, have the odd dinner with AP now and again. But usually, if we end up, we chat about everything else, bar Arsenal or whatever else, you know. So it's not just racing. Good friend of ours, Diana Cooper, we're coming back to the UK for Easter, so we'll meet up with her. She works with Sheikh Mohammed and his charities, and so I'm looking forward to catching up with a few friends from the sport. But Declan Murphy lives out here in Madrid as well, and we catch up from time to time, but we end up talking about anything else but racing, you know. So it's nice to look back. At the same time, there's a lot more to life as well.
Yeah, and you're great. Those champion chases and those great 2-milers he always had was a deep sensation.
Deep sensation. I was lucky to ride him a few times, and I think I won a race or two on him as well. But yeah, Declan, obviously has very special memories of that horse.
Look, another time I'm sure we can talk about Desert Orchid and like Florida Pearl and all these other great horses you rode. But I suppose the Grand National today, I'm gone for Fiddler on the Roof. That's the one I've gone for, Richard, at 5:15, trained by Colin Tizzard. Brendan Powell, hoping to emulate his dad.
His dad, yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Great.
Rhyme and reason, yeah.
Really fantastic, Brendan. Very, very proud father if he wins. Yeah, certainly. So I suppose if I was going to plump for one, I know Alice Plunkett, William Fox Pitt, and Snow Leopardess. Obviously, she's a tough mare and knows the core, knows the fences.
Yeah, she jumped well in the Beecher Chase, and I like a mare hasn't won it, I believe, since 1951, and she's a grey, so I think she'd be popular. I'd say she'd probably go off favourite the way it's gone. But it's a race that had so many stories, Richard. West Tip Mini Houma for yourself, Red Rum, Tiger Roll in recent years, Rachel Blackmore winning it last year. It still captures the imagination, doesn't it?
It does, and it always seems to be a great story around the winners. And yeah, fantastic. We would say look back at West Tip and how he survived. You know, Laurie sort of basically ripped a huge, left him with a huge scar in his quarters, and yeah, he was lucky to even line up for the race.
Richard Dunwoody, you're an absolute legend to join us on Off the Ball Saturday here on News Talk. Great memories of your wins in the Grand National, and the best of luck with what you do going forward.
John, thanks very much. It's been great talking to you.
Richard Dunwoody there. We're back after this.